Silence is not empty. It's full of power. When a man learns to sit with his stillness, to hold his ground without reacting, without explaining, without chasing, he stops being predictable. And when he stops being predictable, he becomes unforgettable. Most men fear silence because they've been conditioned to think they'll lose her if they don't fill the space. Text her back. Call her. Explain yourself. Prove you care. But what if I told you the exact opposite is true? What if the silence you're afraid of is the very thing that makes her obsessed? Women don't fall in love with constant reassurance. They don't desire the man who always shows up with answers, solutions, and validation. They fall in love with the mystery, the unanswered question. And nothing creates that mystery more effectively than your ability to hold silence. Not passive silence, not awkward silence, but intentional, grounded, magnetic silence. The kind of silence that says, I'm not here to prove anything. I know who I am, and I don't need to perform for your attention. This silence does something to the feminine. It disrupts her pattern. It makes her question herself. It makes her chase. And she won't even understand why. Because at a deep level, the feminine is drawn to the unknown, the unexplained, the man she can't fully grasp. But she'll keep trying to, over and over again. That's the spell of the Stoic. The feminine tests, not because she's cruel, but because it's in her nature to seek stability in a world of chaos. And what she wants to know, at her core, is this. Can this man hold his center even when I push? So she'll go silent. She'll withdraw. She'll throw emotional storms at you. Not because she doesn't love you, but because she wants to feel your gravity. Your silence in those moments is your anchor. When you don't react, when you don't chase, when you don't flinch, she feels it. That presence, that unshakable calm, that power. And it drives her wild. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. It tells her more than words ever could. It tells her, I'm not needy. I'm not desperate. I am whole, and you are free to stay or go. That kind of silence is terrifying to weak men, but irresistible to a woman who craves depth. It's not about ignoring her. It's about showing her that your world doesn't collapse when she pulls away, that you're not afraid of space, that your silence is not a punishment, but a reflection of your peace. Most men break in the silence. They fill the void with panic, with paragraphs of texts, with explanations, apologies, begging. But not you. You understand that true power is quiet. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply is. And in that stillness, she begins to wonder. She replays everything. She overthinks. She compares you to every other man who chased. And slowly, that silence becomes a mirror. One she can't look away from. Why? Because in your absence, she finally feels your presence. When a stoic man removes his energy, it doesn't create emptiness. It creates a pull, a vacuum. Because his energy was never grasping, it was grounding. And when it's gone, she feels it in her body. That subtle ache, that shift in polarity. And that's when obsession begins. Not because you tried to make her feel something, but because you didn't need to. If you're resonating with this so far, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell. There's a lot more coming your way. She'll tell her friends, he just stopped replying. But she won't say it like she's mad. She'll say it like she's confused. Because your silence wasn't rude. It wasn't emotional. It was sovereign. And that's what shakes her. You didn't withdraw to punish. You withdrew to protect your peace. There's a difference. See, women aren't drawn to the man who talks the most. They're drawn to the one who feels the deepest but reveals the least. Not out of fear, but discipline. Your silence tells her, I won't beg to be understood. I won't fight to be chosen. It says, I have options, but I chose me first. And that's foreign to most women, especially in today's world. Most men fold for validation. You didn't. That's why your silence echoes longer than words ever could. It haunts, it seduces, and it commands respect. Because a man who can sit with his own silence is a man who doesn't fear hers. When she scrolls through her messages and sees no reply, her mind doesn't go blank. It starts working overtime. Was I not enough? Did I mess up? Why isn't he reacting? That silence becomes a mirror. Not for you, for her. It forces her to confront her own behaviors, her own intentions, her own value. And the more she reflects, the more she replays the moments. What she said, how she said it, what you didn't respond to. Your silence becomes a puzzle. And here's the thing. People obsess over what they don't understand. The absence of noise creates the loudest questions. You didn't have to say, I'm done. You didn't have to declare, I'm walking away. You just went quiet. And in that quiet, you took all your power with you. That's why Stoic men don't yell. They don't explain. They don't chase. They let the void speak louder than drama. And it always does. She'll test the waters. A story posted just for you to see. A vague text like, hope you're good. Maybe even a casual like on an old photo. She's not reaching out to reconnect. She's checking if she still has access. But the silence continues. Not out of spite, but out of discipline. See, when you've built a strong sense of self, you're no longer drawn to chaos disguised as attention. You don't respond to breadcrumbs. You require consistency, alignment, peace. And that's what drives her wild. Not because you're playing games, but because you're not playing at all. The rules she's used to no longer apply. Her usual tactics fall flat. And that's when the shift happens. The one who thought she had the upper hand begins to chase. Not out of love, but out of confusion. She needs to know why you're not reacting like everyone else. She needs to know what makes you different. And the more she questions it, the more you live rent-free in her mind. Because silence is not absence. Silence is pressure. It forces her to face what she's been avoiding, her patterns, her ego, her games. It flips the dynamic completely. Now she's the one overanalyzing, pacing, wondering what she did wrong. And all you're doing is focusing on your purpose, training, working, building. You're not ignoring her. You're just not prioritizing someone who isn't meeting your standard. And that's where real power lies. Not in making noise to be heard, but in being silent and still having an undeniable presence. You've become a mystery, and people chase what they can't define. When you stop chasing, you break her emotional rhythm. The game she was used to, where she pushes, pulls, and watches you react, it's over. That silence, it's not passive, it's calculated. It says, I don't need to prove myself. And that absence becomes louder than any words. She'll check your stories, read into your texts, look for signs, because now you've triggered her uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds obsession, not through manipulation, but through self-respect. You've drawn a line without saying a word, and in doing so, you've given her something modern men rarely offer, mystery, presence, and peace. A man who's not afraid to walk away becomes the one she fears losing the most. When a man speaks less, every word gains weight. And when he disappears from her notifications, her mind fills the gap. She replays the last interaction, looking for signs. Was he upset? Did he lose interest? Did he meet someone else? Silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror she sees not only you, but herself, her insecurities, her unmet needs, her patterns. And the more she reflects, the deeper her emotional investment becomes. You haven't said a word, but in her mind, you're the loudest thing in the room. That's the power of silence. It turns your absence into her obsession. Most men chase when they feel her slipping away, but the Stoic man does the opposite. He steps back, not to manipulate, but to observe, to allow space, to see what rises in the silence. Does she reach out? Does she stay gone? Does she fill the void or flee from it? These answers don't come through arguments or validation seeking. They come through quiet, through composure, through the sacred discipline of doing nothing. Because when you do nothing, her true intentions reveal themselves, not in her words, but in her behavior. That's the moment you separate fantasy from fact. Silence is not passive. It's an active declaration of self-worth. It says, I do not beg for energy that isn't freely offered. And that message, it echoes in her mind louder than any speech. While others try to explain, defend, or impress, you just stay still. Stillness, when done from power, not fear, becomes magnetic. It's the kind of energy that women can't ignore, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unshakable. And in a world full of noise, the man who doesn't try to be heard becomes unforgettable. She starts asking herself questions. Why hasn't he called? Is he over me? Did I lose him? And the more questions she asks herself, the more emotionally invested she becomes. This is the paradox. The less you try to pull her in, the more gravity you create. That gravity is your silence, your presence, your calm refusal to chase. And unlike manipulation, this effect isn't a trick. It's the natural result of self-possession. You're not using silence to get her back. You're using silence to stay with yourself. That difference changes everything. When a man breaks contact but still obsesses over her, checks her social media, hopes for a message, he's not truly silent. He's noisy in his energy. She's not just reading your words or your silence, she's reading your frequency. True silence isn't absence of speech, it's presence without need. When your internal state says, I'm at peace, whether she returns or not, she feels that. And it shakes her, because it signals strength. It signals that your worth is not tied to her response, that you're already enough. When she senses that your silence isn't a manipulation, but a reflection of your inner harmony, she begins to spiral. Why? Because most men don't do this. Most men chase, text, plead, perform. But you don't. You disappear, but not out of pain, out of power. And this disrupts the narrative in her mind. She starts questioning, did he really move on? Was I wrong about his need for me? The silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, she sees the contrast, her chaos, your calm, her noise, your stillness. And suddenly, you're not just the man she used to date. You're the man she can't forget. You see, obsession doesn't come from attention. It comes from absence wrapped in mystery. It's not your words that replay in her mind. It's your silence. The unanswered message. the lack of reaction, the calm detachment. Every moment you stay silent, she writes a new story in her mind. Was he hurt? Was he bored? Is he seeing someone else? The feminine mind craves resolution, and your silence offers none. That vacuum becomes addictive. She'll scroll through old photos, reread old messages, even try to recreate your energy in someone else, and fail. Because what she really wants isn't closure, it's contrast. And your silence gives it to her in full. She'll start testing random messages, subtle likes, questions masked as jokes. She's searching for a crack in your resolve. But the Stoic man doesn't flinch. He doesn't punish her with silence. He simply resides in it. And that's what drives her crazy. He's not playing a game. He's being. Present in himself. Immune to guilt. Free from the need to prove anything. And when a man reaches this level of non-reactivity, he becomes unpredictable. You don't fit into her script anymore. You've exited the story she was trying to write. And now, she wants back in. On your terms. When she realizes she can't read you, she begins to magnify you. The mind can't resist a mystery. Your silence, instead of making her forget you, makes her construct a more powerful version of you in her imagination. She remembers you deeper than you were, smarter, colder, stronger. She fills in the blanks with everything she secretly desires, and in doing so, she creates a version of you that's more attractive than reality. That version begins to haunt her. She sees it in strangers, in lovers who don't measure up. And every moment you stay still, she chases that ghost, your ghost, thinking maybe, just maybe, she still has a chance to bring it back. The masculine frame thrives in non-reactivity. When you stop reacting to her tests, to her withdrawals, to her moods, you stop being a source of validation. And that's exactly what flips the dynamic. She now starts questioning herself. Why isn't he chasing? Did I lose him? Was he always this strong? Your calmness in the storm becomes more intimidating than any argument. While others beg, plead, and explain, you remain centered. And that centered energy makes her realize she never really had control. And that terrifies her. Not because you're cruel, but because you're rare. When she doesn't hear from you for days, it's not the silence that haunts her. It's the meaning behind it. Women are emotional detectives. They feel energy before words. And if your silence carries peace instead of pain, indifference instead of longing, strength instead of anxiety, she knows. She knows you've reached a level most men never touch. Emotional sovereignty. You're not punishing her. You're not playing games. You're simply no longer available to chaos. And that's the most attractive shift you could ever make. This silence, it rewires the dynamic. Suddenly, you're not the one chasing. She is. You've broken the pattern. She's left wondering if she ever truly had you, or if you simply allowed her in. And the more she wonders, the deeper her obsession grows. Because what's rare becomes sacred. And the man who chooses peace over performance, who walks away without a word, becomes the story she tells herself every night. There's something intoxicating about restraint. When a man speaks less, moves deliberately, and holds his emotions with discipline, he becomes magnetic. Women can't help but lean in, trying to decode him, not because he's trying to be mysterious, but because he is grounded. Silence is not emptiness, it's energy. And when your energy doesn't beg to be seen, it demands to be felt. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, she feels the pull. Because now, she's unsure. And uncertainty is the birthplace of obsession. The modern man is told to be open, communicative, always express his feelings. And while emotional intelligence is powerful, overexposure isn't. When a man spills every thought, fear, and insecurity, he dilutes his presence. Silence isn't about manipulation, it's about refinement. It's the difference between speaking to be understood and embodying truth so deeply that words are optional. She senses it. She notices when you're not rushing to explain yourself. She sees when you let her sit in her own emotional waves without interrupting. That's when she starts to obsess. Because now, you feel like a man she can't figure out, a mystery she wants to solve. When you reclaim silence as a source of power, not avoidance, you shift your entire dynamic with women. You're no longer reacting to her moods, her games, her signals. You're steady. You're calm. You're a mirror, not a sponge. And that subtle shift, it triggers something ancient in her psyche, a biological pull toward a man who doesn't need her validation to feel whole. She starts to reframe your silence not as distance, but as dominance. And in that tension, in that sacred space between your presence and her curiosity, attraction catches fire. She leans in. She replays every interaction. She wonders what she missed. And in that wondering, you become unforgettable. Most men break the spell too soon. They feel the urge to text, to explain, to check if she still cares. But a Stoic man doesn't chase clarity. He becomes the clarity. His silence is not a question, it's a statement. And in that statement, she finds her own confusion. She starts to doubt her choices, her assumptions, her power. And that's when you flip the dynamic completely. She begins chasing a version of you she never fully understood. Not because you played a role, but because you refused to. You let her feel the absence of your energy. And now she's addicted to the void you left behind. The truth is, Stoicism in attraction isn't about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally sovereign. When you no longer seek validation, her attention becomes a gift, not a need. When you no longer fear losing her, your presence becomes magnetic. Your silence isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your power. And in that power, you become unforgettable. She won't remember what you texted. She won't remember what you said. But she will never forget how it felt when you pulled away with calm, when you stood in your stillness, and when you chose yourself over the need to explain. That's the kind of silence that echoes for years. That's the power of Stoic attraction.